Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Hidden Archives. In this episode, I will be discussing the Philosopher's Stone and alchemy in the Middle Ages. Now, when many people hear the word alchemy, the first thing that comes to mind is a funny old guy in the Middle Ages trying to transform lead into gold. By this view, alchemy is a relic of an earlier, more superstitious time. If that was truly what alchemy was, you would be right in thinking that, but alchemy is something else entirely. Alchemy was and is used as a cloak for a set of spiritual beliefs and doctrines that go back to at least several centuries before the time of Christ. The roots lie with metalworkers. From early times, man has been fascinated by precious metals like gold and silver, but some also saw gold as representative of an end state for the soul. The smith, working with the gold to purify and refine it, was symbolic of the purifying of the soul within the alchemy traditions. Some modern groups see Tubal-Cain from the book of Genesis as the first alchemist, since he was described as being a pioneering master metalworker. Since early metalworkers found they could create alloys by mixing certain metals, many felt precious metals might themselves be alloys of more common base metals. If they could master the techniques required, they thought they might be able to manipulate the base metals into something greater than the sum of their parts. To these early alchemists, everything was made up of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Each was considered to be the opposite of another, with all things made by an interaction between them in a concept called the unity of opposites. To many, if not most alchemists, such teachings were symbolic of spiritual truths. So even when there were physical practices associated with alchemy, there was a sense of a dual purpose to such practices. Firstly, the alchemist needed to restore himself back to his first nature, as in the state of Adam before the fall. Only then could he be enlightened enough to transmute gross matter to its first nature, create the Philosopher's Stone, and obtain the elixir of life. If this sounds like something out of Harry Potter, that's no coincidence. There are a lot of references to the principles of alchemy in those books. So, to create the elixir of life, the alchemist needed the Philosopher's Stone, and to get that, he needed to master the spiritual aspects of alchemy first, and thereby bring himself into a closer relationship with God. Although to the alchemist this doesn't mean the same thing as it does within mainstream Christianity. The 2 parts to spiritual transformation for the alchemist are the lesser work and the greater work, or magnum opus. In the beginning stage, the alchemist sees himself symbolically as base lead. The goal is to transform himself in stages to gold, or the pre-fall Edenic state. In the dissolution stage of the lesser work, the alchemist goes through mortification, sometimes by abstaining from meat. This is symbolic of turning one's back on carnal passions. This is followed by sublimation, where the alchemist goes through an elevation of the emotions to make the soul more receptive. Finally, in the albedo stage, the emotions or the heart are elevated so that they become free of carnal passion. This is represented by a serpent being elevated on a pole, symbolizing the lifting up of man from a base existence to a higher state of being in communion with the Creator. Once the lesser work is accomplished, the alchemist can move on to the greater work, or magnum opus. In the yellow, copper, or crystallization stage, the alchemist first makes contact with the Holy Spirit. Next, coagulation occurs in the orange stage, represented by iron, when spiritual forces penetrate the body. Lastly, in the rubedo stage, represented by gold, the spirit inside incorporates all aspects of the lower material intellect. This allows for the recongealing or perfection stage, in which the physical body is reborn and reunited with the soul, which is now also united with the inner spirit. So all this sounds confusing, right? The point is, the whole process describes a spiritual transformation of a person. Where did these concepts originate, though? Within the Western tradition, there's a figure called Hermes Trismegistus. There are a number of often conflicting theories about who or what he was, or even if such a person really existed. But what we do know is that at least 42 alchemical works are attributed to him. His followers became known as Hermeticists, and their teachings greatly influenced Gnostic beliefs. The Gnostics believed, as did Heraclitus of Ephesus, that the universe was constantly dying and being reborn, basically an early version of the Big Bang and recycling universe theories today. A picture of a snake biting its own tail often represented this cycle of creation. If avid fantasy readers see a resemblance to The Wheel of Time, as in the popular series of novels by Robert Jordan, this is no coincidence, as Jordan was well versed in the concepts. Another symbol of this duality is the Hadeukas, a variation of the snake on a staff mentioned earlier. The Gnostics taught that the spiritual soul was good while the physical body was evil. Therefore, they taught that the body must be covered to hide the evil. Mainstream Christians countered that if man was made in the image of God, and in the words of the psalmist, we were fearfully and wonderfully made, then the body could not be evil. After all, Jesus himself had said that what was on the outside, the body, was not the origin of evil. He taught that evil came from within, from the soul. This is why mainstream Christians tended to reject Gnostic teachings. In the centuries immediately following the breakup of the Roman Empire, Gnosticism almost disappeared in the West, or at least went underground. In the Eastern Empire, it had more influence, but was largely rejected there as well. It wasn't until fairly late in the Middle Ages that it would return under the banner of the Knights Templar. The reintroduction of Gnosticism and alchemy in Western Europe happened under mysterious circumstances, and the picture is not clear. Once it was introduced again, many were not aware of its existence unless they belonged to the inner circles of groups that followed these practices. In 1307, the Templars were disbanded and accused of various heresies. Under torture, many confessed to worshipping Baphomet. At the time, this was believed to be a reference to a pagan deity, but in the 1980s, a man named Hugh Schoenfield discovered a cipher that he believes reveals Baphomet may have been an enciphered form of the word Sophia, which is Greek for wisdom. Perhaps more significantly, it's a word commonly used by the Gnostics to refer to the so-called divine feminine. So, what is the divine feminine? Well, some see it as simply goddess worship in the same vein as the ancient worship of Aphrodite, Ishtar, or one of various other pagan goddesses. In reality, it's simply a term to refer to the female half of the divine, which goes back to the concepts of the unity of opposites mentioned earlier, with the opposites in this case being the male and female genders. This concept of a duality of nature is common to many cultures of antiquity. The Chinese refer to it as the yin-yang, and the symbol that is commonly used for this is even on the South Korean flag. This duality is also prevalent within the Kabbalist sects of Judaism. Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame, a student of the Kabbalah, said that the so-called Vulcan hand gesture he introduced to the famous science fiction program was in fact a gesture used to summon the Shekinah, which is the feminine aspect or half of God within the Kabbalist tradition. In addition, Kabbalists also teach that evil comes from God just as good does, in a concept not unlike the Force in the Star Wars films. The idea of a female half to God, as taught by the Kabbalah, is echoed in the Gnostic doctrine of the Sophia. The Gnostic Sophia is considered to be the feminine aspect of Christ and is often represented in their teachings in the form of Mary Magdalene. They believe that Jesus, instead of being the literal Son of God, was a Gnostic teacher who taught a path of enlightenment to his disciples, and they scoffed at the resurrection of Jesus. The Apostle Paul vehemently opposed such Gnostic teachings, saying that if there were no resurrection, then the whole idea of faith in Christ would be pointless. The Gnostics saw Jesus as a teacher, but did not see him as being synonymous with Christ. To the Gnostics, the Christos was a divine spark present in all men. This focus on dualism, the rejection of the resurrection, and a striving to attain a higher spiritual level was passed down through the centuries to various groups, including the Knights Templar. After the destruction of the Templars, however, the story becomes a bit more muddled. Some believe their legacy was passed on through a group known as the Priory of Sion, although some have even cast doubt on whether such a group ever existed, much less whether it continues to exist today. Some scholars believe it did exist and think it was in existence at the same time as the Knights Templar, but that it was a smaller group within the organization. According to William of Tyre, the Order of the Knights Templar was founded in 1118, but there may be some evidence that it was in existence several years prior to this. Another interesting thing of note is that there was a school for the Kabbalah at Troyes, the court of the Count of Champagne, who was one of the early members of the Knights Templar. Furthermore, 3 of the 9 founding members came from that same region and may have studied at the school. Nicolas Flamel, the 14th century French alchemist of great fame, claimed to have found a book containing the secrets of the Kabbalah, The legend says that Flamel was able to create the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life and then obtain immortality. This probably means simply that he became a master of the teachings and was seen as being particularly enlightened. In this sense, he would be remembered and achieve a sort of immortality in that way, rather than in a literal sense. Many alchemists of this time period stressed the physical aspects of alchemy to such a point that many outsiders saw it as simply a quest to turn lead to gold. And this was by design, for the alchemists didn't want their true teachings to be public. If they did, there was sure to be persecution from the Catholic Church. In some places, swindlers would use this view of alchemy to travel around proclaiming that they had the ability of transmutation, all in a scheme to cheat people out of their money. This is referenced in the prologue of the Canon Yeoman's Tale in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. Now, many early Freemasons, particularly of the Scottish Rite, saw themselves as carrying on the traditions of the Knights Templar, and it's possible that some of the Templar rites and rituals may have been incorporated as rituals and rites within the Freemason organization. One early order which did have connections to the Templars and may have been a connecting link between the Templars and Freemasons was the Rosicrucian order. I mentioned this order in a previous episode when I was talking about Francis Bacon and John Dee. In one of the writings pertaining to the Rosicrucians, an allegorical piece entitled The Chemical Wedding, the title character is introduced to various aspects of Hermetic knowledge and lore by a character known as Virgo Lucifera, a name that seems to be a variation of Lucifer. Some may find it strange that a group seeking to bring man closer to God would glorify the name of Lucifer, but it must be remembered that the Gnostics don't believe in the Judeo-Christian God who is the creator of the universe. They believe that the divine spark resides within man himself and within all things. To the Gnostic, knowledge is the key to igniting this spark and thereby achieving godhood in their own right. Lucifer is therefore admired by the Gnostics for giving man the knowledge of good and evil. Alchemy still has many secrets and some may be lost to antiquity, but it has influenced history in a major way. From the Zoroastrians and ancient Chinese to the Muslim Sufis to the Templars, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, alchemy has been a source of hidden knowledge for which its followers might have been killed had the authorities known of it in certain time periods. The quest for the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life was not a literal path to wealth and immortality as in popular fiction. It was instead an esoteric path to enlightenment and a hidden secret. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you would like to see more of these videos as they become available, please subscribe and hit the notification button. Until next time, this is Hidden Archives.